performance, and you know, very, very impressive. It's a really complex and difficult piece, and you know, I think that you show, particularly for your age, a really mature understanding of the piece, which is great. It's really good. I have a few things to talk to you about. Do you know, so I see your edition, you have the 1913 version as well as the 1931, right? So the 1913 is, you know, it's like a little too long. We have the same thing with the Brahms, the B major trio. That's also an early piece that he then revamped and cut it down a little bit into something a little bit more manageable. Are you playing the whole sonata? Not yet? Okay. Good. It's, you know, when you finish the first movement, then there's a short interlude and connects to the second. So ideally, it was kind of interesting to me, the two pieces that are on today is that the Prokofiev that you'll hear is also a 3-movement sonata, but their movements are connected. And this is the same thing, is that the movements are more or less connected. So, you know, at some point, it'd be great for you to add that so that you'd have the entire piece. But it's great to hear. It was really good. So just a few things about Rachmaninoff that I think are important to keep in mind is, first of all, he was a pianist. So the stuff that he writes is difficult, but it also really fits the instrument well. So, so I mention that because what I want to say is to trust him. A lot of what we've been talking about this morning and yesterday afternoon was that you have to interpret markings sometimes by composers because they're trying to tell you what the audience should hear, and you have to figure out how you make that happen. So when you see a P, it doesn't mean play everything P, you know? Composers who were writing music for themselves, especially who were teachers, and you know, are a little bit more cognizant of what you actually have to do to make something happen, and the two that pop into mind are Rachmaninoff and Liszt. So when it comes to dynamics, when it comes to rhythm, tempo, is to trust them. So the one thing that I would say that I think is at least worth considering is to doing some practice without rubato. You know, there's nothing that you're doing, Jeslyn, that's not musical, you know, but it's, you know, you have to trust Rachmaninoff, because what happens is that with some of the rhythmic patterns that he writes, he's writing in a retard, or he'll write in an accelerando simply by how, you know, how he paces the harmonic rhythm, how soon chords change, going from 8th notes to 16ths, those kinds of things that it's kind of already there. So what happens is that it's kind of like, you know, if you get a really beautiful cake from the bakery, you know, and it's all filled and it's got all kinds of frosting, and you bring it home, and then you make more frosting and you make more, you know, it's sort of like, it's sort of overkill a little bit. So I'm not saying not to use rubato, you should, okay? But the thing is that be sure that you know first off what it sounds like with what he wrote, okay? Because then what can happen is then you find the places that it's like, oh, it's one of those moments, and then you can take a little bit of time. Because what happens is that if you take time too many times, it starts making those less important. So I was looking, let me give you your score, okay? Because I have a copy on my iPad, and then we can look at measure numbers. There was a chord in here that I think is just, it's one of my favorite spots. I think it's really gorgeous. And it's toward the end, it's at measure 122, and in the middle of that measure, you go to C flat major, and it's completely unexpected. That's the kind of place, then that's where you'd want to take a stretch or make that into kind of a magic moment a little bit. But if you've had 10 magic moments before that, it's not going to stand out. Do you see what I mean? So just try this for me, okay? Somewhere in here you can pick it up, 119, maybe 120, 121, doesn't matter. And what I want you to do is play it as musically and expressively as you are, but steady, okay? And when you get to measure 122, when you get to that C flat major, then stretch into that surprise a little bit, because that's a chord we're not expecting. Okay, can you try that? Yeah. Okay. steady, okay? And again, it's, you know, your rubato is not tasteless or poorly done, okay? It's just there's a lot of it. But that's sort of a spot. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, which I also think that you're doing really well, but I think will be more effective, again, if you think about the longer phrases, because that's another thing that rubato can do, is it can fragment things, you know, because you have a phrase that goes to here, and then you do something here, and then you do something here, and it can end up having the opposite effect of what you're really trying to do. And you know, it's difficult and it's frustrating because this is such a beautiful and magical piece, and it's like every measure practically there's something really special that you want to sort of highlight by stretching. And so you have to think about how it's going to work in a larger context, okay? But by no means think that I'm saying no rubato, because you definitely want to do that. One thing that I think is generally working quite well for you is the descending half steps, the ya da da da, that kind of material is really built throughout this piece, and of course that middle ya da da da, that within the thirds when that theme comes in, yeah, and that just is a place that makes my elbows tickle. It's just so beautiful, but it's very clear that you're hearing those descending, usually 3 notes, sometimes 4, descending chromatic lines, and they're embedded all over the place. The last teacher that I had that I did my doctorate with had studied with, from the time he was 16, with Isabel Vangarova, who's a really famous Russian teacher, and you can trace her lineage back to Leshatitsky. And so there's a big Russian connection, and he was a real Rachmaninoff specialist because of his training with her. And I hadn't really played a lot, but I was working on some with him. And one of the comments that he made, and I have to be honest and, you know, full disclosure, when he said this, I mean, I really thought, you know, you went around the corner and you are now officially nuts, you know, because he said to me, you know, well, Sandy, you know, you need, you know, I mean, Rachmaninoff is the 20th century Bach. Like, really? And he's right, you know, is that the counterpoint in here is just so intricate and so extensive. I was thinking, this doesn't sound like Bach, and that wasn't what he was saying. But the compositional process, you know, there's a certain element of that in Rachmaninoff, in the smaller pieces and in here, of those multiple voices. And I think that you did a really good job of finding those. The one suggestion that I would make is that that I think it might work better if you are aware of them and hear them, and you don't need to yell at us and say, there's the descending, you know, because you're kind of punching them out sometimes a little bit. And the trick is, and this applies when you do like a Bach prelude and fugue or a fugue, you know, is that you don't have to take a cricket bat, you know, and smack us every time the subject comes in. If you can hear it and you're singing it, we'll hear it. And what that means is that the voices become more integrated, that what you want to bring out comes out because you're hearing it, but you don't have to work so hard to bring it out. The good news is that you know they're there. So all you have to do when that comes up, like in measure 3, the ya da da da, I don't have perfect pitch, so I don't know what pitches I'm singing, but ya da da da, all you have to do is sing it to yourself. You don't have to bring it out, because it'll come out if you can hear it, okay? Which is a really great thing to know. I really loved your opening. That was fantastic. It was really good. I don't know if he was thinking about this or not, but that opening reminds me of the opening of the Chopin B minor sonata. Ya-da-da-da-dum-bum. It's just da-da-da-da-yum. I really firmly believe it's a half step lower, but I really think that's a little bit of an homage to Chopin. And I thought you just did it really effectively, really, really effectively. Speaking about some rhythmic things, is that, and this was a little bit later, but let's just take a quick look at, can you go to measure 24? Okay. So what happens here is that he's written syncopation with those chords. So you're in 6/8. Right? So 1, 2, 1, 2, ba 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 ba. So what happens with the rubato is that I get yum bum 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 bum. I can't feel where the beats are. And again, it's not something that you have to, hit us over the head with, but you need to hear it. So can you just play that measure for me? Yum da da da. Play it like jazz. Da da ba 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 ba. Okay, it's not. Ta tum ti ti ta. Okay, so you don't. Again, that's what I'm talking about. You don't have to, smack us with it. Okay, as long as you hear the syncopation and you know where the beats are, just play it as lyrically and long as you want. Okay, try it. Now, let's take a look at that measure 23 and again, or 24, I'm sorry, and then again at 26. So you have half note chords on beats 1 and beats 3. And then you have this little syncopation thing going. So the only indication that he gives you is he puts accents on the half notes. Okay? So I personally would question whether the syncopation is connected to those half notes. Do you see what I mean? So play the half notes and leave the syncopation out. Just leave it out. Just boom, check. Okay, so just the 2 half notes in 24 and then again in 26. Okay, that's all right. Try it again. Okay, so that the syncopation underneath that, it doesn't have to be piano, but it's so loud that I don't hear the yum chum. I think, do you see what I mean? Okay, so try the first one, 24. Yeah, with all the notes in. Sorry. What's its job? Yeah, exactly. It's taking you to the next chord. Like I said, Rachmaninoff's a pianist. When you play that low B flat, what's going to happen to it? What does it do on a piano? Yeah, it diminuendos. So, right. So what he's doing is he's using those chords plus syncopation to extend that note so that, like what a violinist would do, da, ta. We can't do that on the piano. You can push until you fall to the floor, and it's not going to change. So that's what that function is. Yum, tam, tam, ta, ti, ta. Do you see what happens? So it's like he's making it sound like an orchestra. And because he's such a phenomenal pianist, he can make that happen. He knows how to do it on the piano. This is why I'm saying trust him. Okay, can you try it again? Of how this functions and what is structurally important. There's a musical analysis tradition about talking about foreground, middle ground, background. So that I like to think of it as being 3-dimensional listening or 3-dimensional sound. That not everything is in the foreground. So if you've ever done any kind of theater, or gone to theater or seen theater, it's not, everybody doesn't stand right at the front of the stage, right? There's depth, okay? And they go back and forth, and they have to be careful about, if someone is at the front, is to not, by upstaging, what it means is forcing them to turn their back to the audience, So, so you have to really sort of work out the choreography on stage about how the characters interact, in depth. And in music, we kind of have the same thing. So, I think you're playing this really, really beautifully, but I think it would be really helpful for you to start thinking about what is the foreground, what do I want, what's the important thing, and how do the other parts of it support that, just exactly like those cha, 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 cha. So making a little crescendo on those makes total sense. But you want to be sure that then when you land on that second chord, we hear that connection from the low note. You see what I mean? Okay, good. Okay, so as long as we're in this same section, when you get to measure 27, okay, with that arpeggio, when you played it before, you took some time to set the D flat and G flat in measure 28, which I think is okay, except that it wasn't proportional. So I got da. Okay, so da 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 da. So what you could do is, like, say with the last 3 16th notes in that measure, just slightly stretch them, yada da 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 da, which will allow you to do the same thing, which is to set the D flat and G flat, okay? Because he's got this whole Schubert thing going with thirds, B flat minor, G flat major, B flat minor, D flat major, so it's just those 2 notes are always B flat, D flat in the G flat chord, and then D flat F in the D flat chord, 2 common tones all the time. So I think you're absolutely right, to make that G flat major implication in measure 28 and to set it, but just prepare the set a little bit more. Okay, can you start in 27? You want to try that? Yeah, that's the idea. Now in 27, I have a question for you. What do you want to bring out?
I'm trying to bring out, like, the left hand.
Uh-huh.
It's like because it has the same tune as the beginning.
Okay. Can you just play the left hand alone for me? Okay, good. Okay, so this is a really good example of what I was talking about. Can you hear ya da da da? Okay, this time sing that to yourself, but don't bring it out. Okay, so just sing it to yourself. Okay, but don't like I said, hit us with the cricket bat. All right. If you can hear it, we'll hear it. Okay? It doesn't mean that you don't completely bring it out, but you're trying so hard to bring it out that it's sort of overwhelming everything else, and I can't hear the right hand. Okay? So all I want you to do is in your head sing F sharp. What is it? F? F, E natural, E flat, D flat. Yeah? Okay. So just hear it. That's all you have to do. Okay, it really was there. Be sure you sing it to yourself. Do it one more time. That's the idea. Okay. So what's happening is that I have to tell you, I'm going to backtrack just a second. Is that I knew this piece. A colleague of mine, a student of my teacher's, played it, so I heard her work on it, but it was a long time ago. And I hadn't heard it since, so I thought, I better sort of reacquaint myself with this piece. And so I listened to a couple of recordings, and the first recording was by a famous pianist who I will not say this person's name, but I'm telling you, all I heard was noise. It was just noise, 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 noise. I was horrified. And it was, you couldn't hear any, it was just noise. And then I heard another recording that, really had the voices clear and so forth and so on. And I was shocked because this first person is quite a good, well-known pianist. And so, yeah. So I'm really pleased that, you've made such an effort to really, take the component parts apart and see what's going on and bring those out. Just 2 things. Trust your own ear. If you can hear it, it'll come out. Okay? You have to pay attention to balance. I'm not saying just throw it to the winds. But, you know, again, you don't have to go, you know, off the cliff with it either, okay? That was good. Now, when you get to the meno mosso, okay, measure 38. Okay, this is, I think, one of the most beautiful spots in all of Rachmaninoff. This just makes my elbows tickle every time I hear it. So I'd like you to start at the meno mosso, okay? And I want you to play it as absolutely beautifully as you possibly can and in time. Okay, just try it. So what's happening, and this happens consistently throughout, is that you're lengthening the long notes. Okay? Think of the instrument that you're playing. The longer you lengthen it, the more that note is going to die. There's only one direction that a sound played on the piano can go, and that's down. I mean, as far as dynamic goes. So if you can try this, so when you, on the third beat, we're in 12/8, so on the tie, the E flat 16th note, you want to match that sound to where the chord before it has ended up. So it's easier for a singer, but it's because you want to make that line as long as possible. When you mess with the rhythm too much, it does what I was saying before, is it chops it up, and we lose that long lyrical line. And that's what he's been setting us up for, you know, for the first 5 pages, okay, is that yo-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da. So it's, you know, there it is, there it is, there it is, and now this is what it was, what it has blossomed. It's sort of like in the spring, we had a snowstorm in Boston on the 18th or 16th of April. It was a horror story, you know, so I'm waiting for all the flowers to come out, and my hyacinths were like passed out on the sidewalk. It was terrible. But, you know, so the buds came out, and they were like this. That's what the ya-da-da-dum, dee, this is where this happens. So you want to let it bloom, okay? If you chop it up, it's like my hyacinths on the ground, okay, with snow, no snow, all right? So just really simple, just, okay. You don't what?
I felt more in control.
Okay, good. I mean, it's, you know, it may feel uncomfortable to you at first, you know, because you're not used to it. I don't know what the audience thought. To me, that was so lyrical. It was just exquisite in its simplicity, which after 5 pages of, you know, a gazillion notes, I mean, it's dense. This is a dense, complex piece. So as much as anything is, it's kind of like, you know, it gives us that break in the middle a little bit. And it's like I said, trust Rachmaninoff. He really knew what he was doing. Take a look at measure 42. I thought everything in that, Jeslyn, was really beautiful. In measure 42, he says dim, okay? And you put this in there, trust him, okay? He knew what he was talking about. Just start measure 41 at the end of that. Okay, so the downbeat of measure 42 is a dotted quarter note tied to a quarter note. Okay, what's going to happen? It's going to go down, right? So what you don't want to do is the next chord, the E and C, to be louder than where that chord that preceded it ended. Okay? So you have to be careful. So don't get down too low too soon. Then when you do the diminuendo, if you have a tiny little retard, I think that would work just fine. But this is another issue. You have to really plan your dynamics around those long notes. So if you extend them even more, you have a bigger problem. Okay? All right, can you do the same place again? Okay. Yes, good. Go to that. Try it once. I know there's a little decrescendo, but you could do a little bit, but it's coming from mezzo forte, so you don't want to get to piano at the beginning of that measure. Try it again. Okay, now, at the, where you started, you're playing one note at a time. And then, all of a sudden, on the fourth beat, you play 4 notes. What's going to happen when you play 4 notes as opposed to 1 note? It's going to get louder. 4 notes are louder than 1. So that's why, whoops, sorry, I got so excited I threw my pencil. That's why you have to be sure that when you play the single note, it has plenty of sound. And then you gauge how that 4-note thing fits. You see what I mean? Okay. A little more sound. This is a long piece, and I'm sorry to get so picky about the little details, but if you get those, then you can apply it to other spots. Okay? That was beautiful. That really good, really, really good. Okay, so jumping ahead to the Pumoso, measure 60, 61. This rhythm actually comes up starting back at 55. Da, 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 da. That syncopation again. Can you start there at 55 maybe? Okay, so what do you want to bring out?
Probably the left.
Okay, play your left hand alone. Let's check it. Okay, right. So you've got a pedal bass, the D flat just stays put, and then a descending chromatic line. All right. Now let's go back and leave the chords out, but just play your top note. Ya-dum-bum, okay, in your right hand. No left hand, just right hand. Let's just see what the right hand's doing. Okay, so what you've got going here is you've got parallel descending action going, right? Let's be just blunt here, okay? These 5 measures, 4 measures, whatever, do not contain the melody of the century, right? So these measures really aren't about melody, okay? So what are they about, do you think?
I think it's just like a transition between
Huh?
like a transition to the next.
Yeah, but if you think about it, you want to bring out the melody, and melody is not an issue here, then what is the issue, do you think? It's a transition for sure, but we're trying to think about what you want to make clear here. If it's not melody, it's probably harmony, exactly, right. So what happens is that these come together to make the harmony, okay? So keep your hands equal for right now, because we're just going to listen to what's going on, and I don't want you to play the rhythm, okay? All I want you to do is I want you to play the right hand as if there's no 16th rest there, and I want you to play those notes like 3/8 notes. Ya-dum, cha-chi-da. Okay, because we're interested in the harmony right now, not the syncopation. We'll deal with the syncopation later. Is what I'm saying make sense?
So just like everything except.
Yeah, just everything, just even 8th notes, plumb, because we're just listening to the harmony.
Okay.
Okay. No, just right together. Ya-dum, cha. Both hands, yeah. making them equal and we can hear how they interact, that one without the other isn't going to make sense. They have to really work together. So do it again, all right? Just listen to it, okay? And then you can decide what to do. Expectation at all. No B flats, okay, but we have the F. Okay, that's the common tone in there. So all of these, thirds relationships that, we see earlier, but Schubert is the one that is famous for, relationships of thirds instead of 1 to 5 or that kind of thing. Okay. So I think in that transition place, I think that if you work too hard to try to find a melody, there isn't one, and it's okay. It's functioning as something different, all right? So try it now as written, okay? Now that you have the sound of that in your ear, and let's see how it goes when you transition to D minor. Now, I want you to dial down the agitato, okay? And I want it to just be calm, okay? See how that works, all right? Yeah, you have that da-da-da-da, the syncopation, is to really try to take the edge off of it. So it's not going to make sense until we transition it. So can you go back to 53 and let's see how that all fits together now. When you get into the 6/8, I can't, it sounds like the beat is in the right hand. Ya-dum bum be dum bum ba bum 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 bum. Okay. One of the things I would say in the measures before that is you have piano, and then you have a subito mezzo forte, only mezzo forte, with the decrescendo down to piano again, and then a subito mezzo forte. The catch is that you telegraph that a mezzo forte is coming up. Da-dum, ta-ta. Da-dum, pum, pum. So the trick, and it's human nature, because we're not supposed to know mezzo forte is coming, but you most certainly do, and it's really hard not to give away the secret, is to make a tiny decrescendo. Da-da-da-pa. Okay? Because the tendency is going to want to crescendo slightly. Okay? So tiny, tiny decrescendo. 53 again. Good. That was better. The first measure was better than the second, but they were both better. Now, here's the next thing, is can you do it without a retard at the end of measure 54?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, try it. Good. Okay, so it's quarter note equals down to quarter note. Okay, so start at 53 again at this tempo. Right, because the dotted quarter note is equal to the old quarter note. Okay, so you're going to feel that beat. Da 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 ba 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 ba. Okay, so just kind of check that. Okay, good. And you want to be sure that you feel the beat is in the bass. It's not in the right hand. But I think that works a lot better, sort of hearing that harmony. So it's a tricky spot. So it's one you want to play around with just a little bit so that it feels really organic and natural. Okay, now this is another one of my favorite spots over here is measure 90. Rachmaninoff came to the United States. He was in Paris and then he was an expatriate of Russia, but really maintained a very close cultural relationship, like most Russian expats, Stravinsky and others too, with the Russian music and Russian culture. So in the first suite for two pianos, the last movement is called Russian Easter. And in the Orthodox tradition, Easter it's like the be all and end all, and it's just everything closes down, and it's just a huge, huge festival. It's big in all churches in Christendom, but for the Orthodox Church, the celebration of Easter is just, surpassing anything you can imagine practically. So this one Russian Easter, it's imitating these bells, this kind of bell thing, where the bells are ringing and so on, and you get this here. So I think that the first suite was written sometime. I would be lying if I gave you a date, but I think it's written sometime not far off from the first iteration of the sonata. So there's that whole, again, Russian Easter. And that, for me, in measure 90 and 91, is this bell thing. So this is one spot that I just want to really be careful not to rush. Don't slow it down. But also, don't get so worked up with the left hand that we lose that bell. Yum, bum, 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 bum. Those descending scale triads, okay? Because I think that they're really important. And it's also where you set up this big climax then in measure 92. Dee, da, da, dee, da, dum, bum. That's a spot where I think if you're not taking a retard, every two measures, that you can stretch a little bit at 91 going into 92 to set up that climax. Not too much, because 6 measures later you get the recap, and that's really where this is all heading. Okay, so you can set it up a little bit for 92, but again, don't make that sort of the big climax when you have another one 6 measures later, that big return to B flat minor. So can you start wherever it's comfortable, somewhere in the 80s? Okay, so you pick. What I would suggest that you be careful with is that you're playing a 9-foot piano here, okay? And those low strings are, 7 or 8 feet long. And the strings up here are like long, they're smaller. So, and you're a very, very strong pianist, but if you let your left hand get too strong and too heavy, what it does is it makes your right hand sound weak. Your right hand is not weak, but it makes it sound weak. So again, like I was saying, your left hand's going to come out. We're going to hear it, okay? You can hear it, so we're going to hear it. So what I'd like you to try to do is start in the same place, and let's see, keep it nice and steady, okay? But pay a little more attention to your right hand, okay? And trust that your left hand is going to be there. You know how it sounds. It'll come out, all right? Just give it a try. So measure 86 to 87, you have a descending line from C sharp. 88 to 89, a descending line from E. And then it intensifies with the descending line from C, where now the chords are blocked rather than broken, which is going to make them stronger. This is Rachmaninoff again being, you know, the quintessential piano composer, because he makes it sound, it makes it stronger. Because when you break it, it's not as strong, and so it's a way of writing in a crescendo, okay? But you want to hear those sequences, which when your left hand was too much going, then it was hard to hear, okay? Right, and so then toward the end, when you get back to the meno mosso and yam da 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 da, we talked about it before, is to be sure that you don't lengthen the already long notes, because it'll break it up. That was a note that I made. In measure 123, be sure you hear the music take you back to B flat minor. So when you get to the tonic, when you're heading to the tonic to B flat minor, you always want to make an event of that, okay? Because that's really important. I thought your ending was beautiful. It was great. It was a wonderful performance. I don't have anything after this, so we're going to run late today. Sorry. Okay? Really, congratulations. Beautiful.